What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of Pistons Daily, where you can find daily content covering all things Detroit Pistons, Monday through Friday. As always, I'm your host. My name is Kyle Garrison. I'm over on Twitter at Kyle Garrison2, where I talk all things Detroit sports. So head over there, give me comments, questions, concerns, episode ideas. I'd love to hear from all you guys. Also, shout out to everyone who tunes in every single day. We are on the road to 2,000 subscribers. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way to help support the channel. With that being said, let's jump into a Wednesday edition of Pistons Daily. So in Tuesday's episode, I had stated that Malik Beasley's federal gambling investigation was completely over, and that was thought to be the case, I think, amongst all of Pistons media. But more news has come out today that although Malik Beasley is not a target in the investigation, he is still considered a subject, which means that charges could still eventually be filed. So this is exactly why I chose to just voice my opinion on the impact of Malik Beasley being prematurely cleared and not the actual content of the investigation. I don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. Obviously, a lot of people in the NBA community as well didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. Shams came out and said that the investigation was over, and then it comes out a couple of days later on Tuesday that he could still be eventually charged. He's just no longer a target, but rather a subject. So obviously, I will continue to monitor the situation, and I'll report any more factual evidence regarding the investigation. But for now, we're just still going to have to wait to get an official final verdict on what is going on, what the future of Malik Beasley looks like in the NBA, if he's going to be able to come back. And once we do get that confirmation, then we'll continue to talk about whether or not I think he'll come back to the Pistons or if he's going to sign elsewhere. So again, just going to have to play it by ear, figure out what is going on. Obviously, there's a much more that has gone into it than we know and that we believe. So we're going to have to continue to monitor that, and I'll update you guys, let you guys know what's going on and what I'm hearing. Well, once again, I apologize if anyone watched yesterday's video after the report came out. Because, again, he's still a subject in the investigation. I had stated that the investigation was over and that he was not going to be charged, but there is still a possibility of that happening. And the turnaround time on these videos is usually 12 hours because I like to do them the night before. So I'm recording this on Tuesday. This is Wednesday's episode. So sometimes news will break after I've already recorded, and that was the case yesterday. So I just wanted to update you guys there. I'm sure you've seen on social media that the investigation is still ongoing and that Malik Beasley could still be charged. But I just wanted to give that information out, clear up what I talked about yesterday, and just get everyone up to speed, up to the same level of just understanding of what's going on. But nonetheless, any new information regarding Malik will be the priority for these videos, and I will talk about anything new that comes out. I don't want to spend too much time on this topic. I know I talked about it pretty much the entire video yesterday. So I just want to move on to a Bleacher Report article that listed every NBA team's Mount Rushmore since the start of 2000. So Dan Favale and Grant Hughes collaborated on this article over at Bleacher Report. I've talked about various articles written by both journalists, Favale and Hughes. If I'm butchering Favale's last name, please let me know in the comments. I don't know if it's Favale. But anyways, they do a great job over at Bleacher Report, especially during the offseason. They have to get creative because there's just not a ton going on. And they dropped their Mount Rushmore for each NBA team. And I think for the four Pistons, it's pretty self-explanatory here. They've got Chauncey Billups, Rip Hamilton, Tayshaun Prince, and Big Ben Wallace. So I'll just read what was written in regards to the Pistons Mount Rushmore. So including 80% of the starting lineup from the 2003-2004 Detroit Pistons team doesn't just feel right. It's the only call when factoring in longevity. Chauncey Billups and Ben Wallace rattled off multiple All-NBA selections during their time in Detroit. Wallace is tied with Rudy Gobert and Dikembe Mutombo for the most Defensive Player of the Year nods in league history with 4. All of those came in a Pistons jersey. Tayshaun Prince's longevity is unmatched. He played in 137 more games than any other Pistons player during this era. He ranks in the top 5 all the major counting stats, including steals and blocks as a result. Meanwhile, Rip Hamilton was a bucket-getting anomaly on contending cores that prioritized a defensive lean. He not only leads the quarter century in total points, but he's second in assists and third in steals. Cases can be made for Rasheed Wallace and Andre Drummond, and maybe even Cade Cunningham. They're just not strong enough. So that was written by Favale, and I think this is 100% accurate. I think if you've been a Pistons fan your entire life, for me, I was very, very young during that 03-04 season. So I don't have a ton of recollection of these players, but I've watched film. I've gone back and watched the entire finals from the 2004 season against the Lakers, and I was able to just dive into kind of what this team was all about. And having 4 of the 5 players that were on that team makes a lot of sense. Obviously, they don't have Rasheed Wallace there, which, you could probably plug him in for maybe Tayshaun Prince, but I do, like the article mentioned, Tayshaun Prince's longevity and the fact that he's in the top 5 for all statistical categories for the Pistons is pretty remarkable. So I think that is pretty fair to have him right there. And you're looking back at the 2000s, Grant Hill was already in Orlando by the time 2000 rolled around. And then the going to work Pistons really took over. From 2001 to 2008, the Pistons would win 50 games, 50 games, 54 games, 54 games, 64, 53, and 59 games over those 7 years. And since then, the Pistons have won over 40 games just 3 times and have yet to reach 45 wins in that time span. So obviously, that team was special. Those going to work Pistons teams were very, very special, and they deserve all the flowers for sure. They've carried the Pistons in the 2000s. Obviously, the teams in the 90s with Zeke and Bill Laimbeer and Joe Dumars kind of had their own success in their own right. But this going to work team winning an NBA championship with no true number 1 star was very impressive. So to give those 4 players their flowers and to have them as the Mount Rushmore makes a lot of sense, especially considering the collective team effort that went into winning that championship. And then you're looking at the players that you could consider for the Mount Rushmore, in that time frame. You've got Andre Drummond, Blake Griffin, like I mentioned, Rasheed Wallace as well, who would probably be number 5 in that Mount Rushmore. And then you've got guys like Reggie Jackson and Tobias Harris, and maybe Greg Monroe. The list is not very long, so I just think that this makes a lot of sense. And Cade Cunningham's a guy that could definitely hop into that list. I do think that Cade Cunningham, overall, as a singular player, is the most talented Piston that we've had since Isaiah Thomas. And I think he will go down as one of the greatest Pistons of all time. I know that's probably going to be a pretty hot take just because Chauncey was unbelievable. He won a Finals MVP, pretty much, was that heart and soul of that team, him and Ben Wallace, really. So I don't want to take anything away from Chauncey, but if Cade is able to be a Piston for life and he's able to, continue to dominate, continue to put up the numbers that he is, and hopefully eventually win an NBA championship on the Pistons, then he will go down as one of the greatest Pistons of all time. And right now, you might be looking at him as maybe that 5th or 6th option in the Mount Rushmore of the 2000s, and he's going into, I think, year 5 this year. So, he's just got so much talent, and I understand when you're looking at the past 15 years and the fact that Andre Drummond and Greg Monroe and Reggie Jackson are guys we're talking about potentially being in that top 4 of the last 25 years is pretty ridiculous. But the silver lining is that Cade Cunningham is on his way to being considered one of the top Pistons since the 2000s and one of the top Pistons of all time. So we've got that to look forward to, and it's nice that we have a current player who really has a chance to, I think, be better than all the 4 players mentioned. I think that he has a real shot to be better than Chauncey, Rip, Tayshaun, and Ben Wallace. Obviously, all of those players were great in their own rights. Ben Wallace, menace defensively, one of the greatest defenders of all time. Chauncey Billups, Mr. Big Shot, unbelievably clutch. But just with what Cade Cunningham can do as a facilitator and as a scorer, the attention he draws, the rim defending that he brings, there's a lot to like there. And I think there's a ton of room for growth compared to last year. And if you're looking at his season last year, that was one of the best single seasons by a Piston that I've seen in my entire lifetime. So very, very just, high on Cade Cunningham. I think that his ceiling is unbelievably high, and he can go down as one of the greatest Pistons of all time. And I hope within the next 2 years, we're talking about him on that Mount Rushmore, and it's not just all 4 players from one singular team that was over 20 years ago. So let me know in the comment section down below if you agree with Bleacher Report's Pistons Mount Rushmore since 2000, if there are any other players you would include, and if you think that Cade Cunningham can eventually find his way on this list. But moving on, another article that I thought was pretty interesting was from Zach Harper over at The Athletic, and he dropped his top 40 power forwards in the NBA this season. And I was just very, very surprised to see Tobias Harris as high as he was. He was listed at 18 on the list. And I'll just go through, I'm just going to go through 11 through 25 and just kind of the players that are considered in Tobias Harris tier. So 11, Jabari Smith, 12, Jalen Johnson, 13, PJ Washington, 14, Dorian Finney-Smith, 15, Jeremy Grant, 16, Miles Bridges, 17, Bobby Portis, Tobias Harris, 18, Rui Hachimura, 19, John Collins, 20, Tari Eason, 21, Santi Aldama, 22, Kyle Kuzma, 23, Matas Buzelis, 24, and Harrison Barnes, 25. So I think that this is pretty fair to have Tobias Harris at 18. I think there's a couple players behind him that could be in front of him, and there's a couple players in front of him that could be behind him. I do think that players like Jeremy Grant and Dorian Finney-Smith don't bring offensively what Tobias does. And when you look what Tobias did in the playoffs against the Knicks last year, or this past year, he was unbelievable on the defensive end. He was just as good as Dorian Finney-Smith and Jeremy Grant offensively or defensively, and I think he's a better offensive player than both those guys. I agree Jabari Smith, Jalen Johnson, PJ Washington are better players. I don't think Miles Bridges is. I think that Tobias Harris is just more impactful when it comes to winning than Miles Bridges. Bobby Portis, I do think that Tobias Harris is better than as well. And then the guys behind him like Rui Hachimura and John Collins, I do think you can make a case for John Collins being better than Tobias Harris. But again, John Collins was on the Jazz last year, wasn't contributing to winning, and Tobias Harris was. So I think that had a lot to do with it. And then a guy like Tari Eason, I'm a little bit surprised to have behind Tobias Harris. I would think that he would be in that top 15 just with his youth and what he's brought to the table, the improvement that he's shown. Santi Aldama, another guy also 24 years old, has shown a ton of improvement. Very, very solid piece for the Grizzlies. But Kyle Kuzma, Matas Buzelis, Harrison Barnes, Tobias Harris is definitely better than those 3 players. So I think there's a tier right there that I mentioned that you could have Dorian Finney-Smith, Jeremy Grant, Miles Bridges, Bobby Portis, Tobias, Roy, John Collins, and Tari Eason and Santi Aldama. I think right there is a pretty solid tier of power forwards. And then you get up into the Aaron Gordons, the Lauri Markkanens, Pascal Siakam, Julius Randle, Zion, even Draymond Green. I don't know if Draymond Green will be on this list much longer, but he's still playing at a high level. Still is impactful with winning. So I like this list overall. I think there's some different things that I would change here and there, but nothing too drastic. I do understand the way that Tobias Harris played in the playoffs last year is a big reason why he's up at 18. Just the defense he played, again, the contribution to winning that he showed. He was a veteran presence in that locker room. And I think he had a very, very big impact on the Pistons going from 14 wins to 44. So it's justified to have him at 18, regardless of him entering age 33 season. I believe this is season 15 in the NBA, maybe 14, but still he's a longtime vet in this league. And I'm just glad that, guys like Zach Harper in the NBA media are showing him some love and giving him the props that he deserves. Because it does make me feel a lot better that there's other people that are high on Tobias Harris, because I've talked about how I think he's still going to have a productive year this year. I have a lot of people in the comments who don't agree with me, but Zach Harper tends to think that Tobias will still have an above average season this year and be in that top 20 power forward ranking. But let me know in the comments if you still think Tobias is a top 20 power forward in the NBA, or just where you would rank him amongst the current landscape of NBA power forwards. And then last segment before we wrap things up, another article. I know I'm doing a lot of articles right now just because the NBA season has been extremely slow. But I just wanted to touch on some of the different award lists that ESPN put out. They put a top 5 for every NBA award. So I'll just go through kind of the rankings here and what Pistons I think could potentially hop into those lists. So for MVP, it goes Jokic, Luka Doncic, SGA, Giannis, and Anthony Edwards tied for 4th, and then Kevin Durant 5th. And for MVP, I don't know if Cade Cunningham is going to crack that top 5. I believe he finished 7th last year, but finishing in that top 5 is not out of the realm of possibility whatsoever. They have a lot of older guys on this list, like Kevin Durant and Giannis, who could potentially take a step back next year. Kevin Durant is now on a team where he's probably not going to be as crucial in the scoring department. He's still going to probably average 25 points per game, I'd imagine, 25 plus. But they're not going to rely on him so heavily to be ISO every single time they need a bucket at the end of a shot clock or the end of a quarter, like the Phoenix Suns were. So I could see Kevin Durant's production dropping a little bit. And with the stats that Cade Cunningham put up last year across the board, combined just with his impact overall on winning and the fact that he willed this team to wins last year at times, if he can put up around 27 and 10 on solid efficiency and the Pistons win 48 to 55 games or whatever, he'll be in that top 5 for MVP. I have no doubt about that. And I know ESPN has him on the outside looking in right now, but I do think that Cade could crack that top 5 come the season's end. But moving on here, no Rookie of the Year candidates for obvious reasons. Pistons didn't have a first-round pick. Chaz Lanier was their only draft pick. He was in the second round. I don't even know if he'll get a single minute on the Pistons roster this year. So we'll move on from the Rookie of the Year rankings. I'll just give who they have. 1, Cooper Flagg. 2, Dylan Harper. 3, VJ Edgecombe. 4, Con Knippel. 5, Ace Bailey. Pretty much the exact draft order besides Trey Johnson is not on there, which I think he's going to have a good year. I'm surprised that they don't have him at 5 there. They have Ace Bailey ahead of him, but we'll just have to see. And then Depoy. It's basically all centers, usually how it is in the NBA. Victor Wembanyama, Evan Mobley, Chet Holmgren, Giannis, and Rudy Gobert. And that's just because for some reason the NBA really only values blocks instead of steals. Don't know why that is. But I do think that Ausar Thompson could be one of the only non-power forward / centers that is in that top 5 when the season ends. I've talked about it before. I'm confident that Ausar Thompson will be on all defensive first or second team, just depending on injuries and if he's able to stay healthy. And just the on ball and combined with the off ball skill that he has, he's going to be considered a top defender, not only at his position, but in the sport by the end of this season, by the end of only year 3. And so I do think that there is a real possibility he cracks that top 5. He's got unbelievable upside defensively. We've talked about it a ton on this channel, and I expect him to put people on notice this season. And then moving on to Sixth Man of the Year, they have Alex Caruso, Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Peyton Pritchard, and Ty Jerome. And obviously, the Pistons are going to have a pretty solid bench core, I'd say, in the 4 main guys coming off the bench in Karis LeVert, Ron Holland, Duncan Robinson, and Isaiah Stewart. I don't think Duncan Robinson or Isaiah Stewart will have the role or the minutes to win that Sixth Man of the Year award. Karis LeVert could very well average 13 to 14 points a game and 4 assists per game if he starts to become more of that backup point guard, that backup ball handler with the bench unit. If that Jaden Ivey backup point guard experiment doesn't work out, then we could see Karis LeVert with a much expanded role. And I think that he could vault himself into that top 5 or 6 Man of the Year. He does have to have a more efficient season than he did last year across the board. And I think that could be a possibility, but I'm not banking on it. But the one guy I think that could very, very likely crack that top 5 is Ron Holland. He's going to have a much bigger role this year. I could see him playing anywhere from 25 to 30 minutes a night. They're going to run specific plays for him. He's going to be a huge focal point of this team. It's Trajan Langdon's only first-round draft pick he's had so far as the Pistons president of basketball operations, and I do think that Ron Holland is going to have a massive, massive role on this team and could potentially even be considered for most improved. I know they don't like to give it to second-year players, and I agree with that, so I would like to see him be in consideration for that Sixth Man of the Year award. Obviously, as long as the starting rotation stays healthy, then he'll be coming off of the bench a majority of the year, and he could crack into that top 5. We'll just have to see. Only time will tell. And then lastly, Coach of the Year. Or actually, excuse me, most improved player, sorry. They've got Amen Thompson, Andrew Nemhart, Asar Thompson, Denny Abdia, Jalen Johnson. I know I just talked a ton about Asar Thompson, so I won't tap into that too much, but I think Asar Thompson has a great chance to win one of the Defensive Player of the Year or Most Improved. More likely Most Improved, obviously, because like I said, the NBA values blocks more than they do steals. So I guarantee you a guy like Victor Wembanyama will win it this year. But I do think that Most Improved Player is in contention because, like I mentioned, he's going to have a bigger role this year. He's going to have an uptick in minutes. And I know his brother is number one in the voting right now, or the preseason award voting. But I do think Asar Thompson could potentially jump him just with that increased role, showing what he can do defensively. And Amen Thompson really did show his offensive skill set last year that I don't think Asar really got the chance to do. And this year will be Asar's year to really make that jump. And I could see him winning Most Improved Player. I think that is probably the most likely award for the Pistons to win. But again, Cade MVP could be up there in talks. I don't think he'll win it. But a guy like Ron Holland could win Sixth Man of the Year. And a guy like Asar Thompson could very well win Most Improved Player. And then lastly, before we wrap things up, the Coach of the Year, they've got Jamel Mosley of the Magic, Quinn Snyder of the Hawks, Ime Udoka of the Rockets, Mike Brown of the Knicks, and Mitch Johnson of the Spurs. And when you're looking at the top two guys, the Magic and the Hawks, what happens if the Pistons have a better record than both those teams? They both, quote-unquote, got better than the Pistons this offseason. So if the Pistons have more wins, then it should be J.B. Bickerstaff over those two guys. Ime Udoka, he gets Kevin Durant, and all of a sudden is considered one of the better coaches in the league. I don't know if that really makes sense. Still think he's a great defensive coach, and he's still, a good coach in his own right. But, they were the 2 seed last year. I don't know how much better they can get. I think that would be interesting if he were to win it. And then Mike Brown taking over the Knicks, who were one of the best teams in the East last year, made it into the Eastern Conference semifinals. Taking over an unbelievable roster. I don't think that he should deserve to win it. And then Mitch Johnson taking over for Greg Popovich, the best coach of my lifetime in the NBA. And he has Victor Wembanyama, De'Aaron Fox, Dylan Harper. He's got Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson. He's got all of these great players. I don't know if he's very deserving of winning Coach of the Year. Obviously, if they make a huge jump, then that could be the case. But I think that not having J.B. Bickerstaff in the top 5 is a travesty. So I think that ESPN, the only list that they did not get correct is this one. I think that J.B. Bickerstaff should definitely be in the top 5 for Coach of the Year heading into the season, especially after being snubbed last year. Leading the team from 14 wins to 44 wins should automatically get you Coach of the Year. I think that was a very disappointing that he didn't. But again, can't dwell on it too much. Results are results. Awards don't mean much. We're trying to go win games. So at the end of the day, I'd take an NBA Finals over any single award for one singular player. I don't think that means very much. But let me know in the comments your thoughts on the ESPN preseason awards list, what you liked, what you would change, and who on the Pistons has a real chance to take home one of these awards. But that's all I've got for you guys today on a Wednesday edition of Pistons Daily. As always, like, subscribe, comment, turn on post notifications, and follow me on Twitter at Kyle Garrison2. Also, head over to Spotify, leave a 5-star review and a follow if you can. And once again, thank you all so much for tuning in every single day. With that being said, that is going to do it here for episode 52 of Pistons Daily, and I will catch you all next time.